25 properties in the first year?
I bought about 20, 25 units my first year of investing. It was very fast, maybe a little bit crazy. I was 22 and I couldn't invest locally where I live. The properties around me are like $1 million plus for just a tiny little rental. As investing of rental properties are the best place to start. A lot of people will buy one deal in 1 year and be like, I'm tapped out. There is another way to grow your money that is backed by real estate and a little bit less volatile than the stock market. I ended up raising over.
Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, the show where we help you build your own portfolio of cash flowing rental properties that you can manage in just 20 minutes per day from anywhere in the world. I am your host, Aaron Amin. My wife and I built a portfolio of 8 cash flowing rental properties across 3 states in 3 years, all while working full time and starting a family of 3 young kids. Today, I have a very special guest, Miss Soli Cayetano, a woman of many talents. Soli, who runs the popular Lattes and Leases brand on Instagram, has built an impressive portfolio of real estate, including 40 plus rental properties, the majority of which are out of state. Soli also founded Hello Rentals, an online community and coaching program for investors looking to build their own portfolios. Her ability to build a strong network and versatile toolkit of real estate investing skills has inspired hundreds of new investors to get off the sidelines and start their own real estate portfolios. All right, let's get into it. Soli, I've been a longtime admirer and follower of yours and also a happy member of your community. But for those who don't know you, can you introduce yourself to my audience here in your own words?
Yeah, no, it's great having you in the community. It's been so much fun and hearing more of your story as well. I'm an investor out of, I guess it depends where I'm at the moment, but Palm Springs in the Bay Area. And I had my start with out-of-state real estate investing in more affordable areas like Cincinnati, Ohio, Augusta, Georgia. I was pretty young when I started. So I was 22 and I couldn't invest locally where I live. So I jumped into much more affordable areas and built my portfolio through doing rental properties and burrs and flips, and eventually got into some bigger deals too. So my latest deal is a boutique hotel in Palm Springs. And I mentioned earlier that I was closing out a short-term rental here too. And so while I primarily teach out-of-state investing, it's funny because I'm now getting into like in-state investing, but I truly do believe that out-of-state investing, affordable rental properties are the best place to start.
No, I love it. One of the things I appreciate the most about your story is that you've allowed yourself to evolve over time, right? You found the right entry point and then you've let your own vision kind of expand. And now you're taking down boutique hotel and you started the community, which you're passionate about growing. And you have all these kind of different areas of your life that you've watered and seen grow in these different ways. But before we talk about the current state, it'd be fun to talk a little more about the origin, right?
Yeah, so it was 2020 when I got started investing. I was a senior in college and it was the pandemic. So my like spring semester of senior year, when everyone was like trying to party, we're like forced into shelter in place. And I was going into, at the time, I was working at a big commercial real estate firm. And I had been working there for the last about 3 years. I was thinking about I was going full time and it was a commission-based job, leasing office space. And so as you can imagine, leasing office space was very difficult during the pandemic because nobody wanted office space. And so I was trying to figure out how could I set myself up to pay for my rent and buy my groceries when there was a very real possibility that I wouldn't be making money in the next however many months or years that the pandemic lasted. I read some books, I talked to some friends, and they all talked about buying properties out of state. The properties around me are like $1 million plus for just a tiny little rental property. And the numbers just don't work. Like they just don't cash flow. And so talking to other people, they're like, oh, I bought this property in Florida or I bought this property in Ohio. And I was like, that's crazy. That's really crazy. Like, you've never seen them before? And they're like, no, we've never seen them before. I was like, how do you know they exist? And all the questions that like people ask me today about investing out of state seemed like super out of reach, very difficult, scary, super risky. And I felt the exact same way when I was learning how to invest too. But because I had a couple of friends who had done it, I just kind of followed in their footsteps, read some books and just did it. So I bought my first rental property and it was like July of 2020, really fast, had no idea what I was doing or getting into. But I fell in love with the process and sharing the process on Instagram with my new friends and my new community. And I ended up scaling very fast after that.
Yeah. So you hit on one other thing, right? Which is Instagram, right? And building a personal brand and using that to fuel your network. So I think it makes sense, right? You conquered a lot of that initial anxiety around, hey, this is out of state. I can't see it. I can't touch it. how do I know it's real? How do I know it's going to operate? A lot of that initial anxiety, like you said, that most out of state investors encounter. Once you conquered that hurdle, it sounds like you really latched on and it resonated with you and you saw how powerful it could be. So you decided to lean in and even move towards full time. Is that right?
Yeah, it was about 15 months after I started investing that I went full time into investing, but I scaled very fast. So I bought about 20, 25 units my first year of investing. And it was really, I think like it was very fast, maybe a little bit crazy. I was young, didn't really know what I was getting into. But I feel like because of Instagram, you have to remember like this is during the pandemic, like prime pandemic. Nobody was going out. Like we were just on the internet, scrolling on Instagram, scrolling on TikTok. And because I had kind of curated my feed to just be real estate investors, my whole life changed. I went from going to college classes and going into an office where I was working to just like 24/7 being inundated by investors, delayed gratification, like people patting me on the back for buying rental properties. My whole friend group changed because I made friends on Instagram with other real estate investors who kind of were prioritizing different things in life. And so that was really key for me. I think a lot of people struggle with that because their friends don't invest in real estate and now there's not some like big global event that pushes you out of your friend group. But that was like a really key thing for me was being surrounded by other people who were doing it.
So how did you find that early community or start to build the network when you didn't have all the units yet? You didn't have the personal brand. What were some of the early keys to building relationships?
Actually, all my posts are still live. Like if you scroll back 700 and something posts, like you find my very early posts and they weren't very good, but I really came at it like I am super new. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can at least document what I'm doing and maybe it will be helpful for somebody. And so I used it as a diary for myself. And I'm really glad I did that because now I can go back and see like where I came from. And people have been following me since the very, very beginning. And I think that two things came from it. There were other people who are starting at the same time as me who now like we're best friends. We're all full-time real estate investors. Like we all go travel around the world together, but they latched onto my story and I latched onto theirs because we were doing the same thing and just trying to start. And then there were a lot of people who became pseudo mentors because they were watching what I was doing and they could see some of themselves in me and they were like, oh, I remember when I was doing that. And I think it's actually very rare for people to actually take action and then do what they say that they're going to do. And so I think as people saw me putting in offers and analyzing deals and posting it on my story, they're like, oh, this girl's like actually serious. Like she actually wants to do something. And then I bought my first property and then I didn't know how to do anything. But because I had taken action and shown that I was the type to take action, they wanted to pour into me and help me get to the next level.
Yeah, I love that. One other thing I want to highlight from what you said is that you grew together with people who started around the same time as you. I think sometimes when people are new and they're getting into, hey, how do I network? How do I build a personal brand? They're like, how can I go meet and become Brandon Turner's best friend? Well,
I
Brandon Turner started 12 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever it is. And he worked his way up the ranks with other groups of peers. And maybe it's the wrong question versus finding who are the people that are there progressing at or around the same stage as you, or maybe one or two steps ahead. And how do you get in those circles and grow together instead of trying to cut all the way to the top of the line? So I think that's a really good
yeah.
highlight.
And he probably gets like thousands of messages per day where the people I was talking to, and I honestly had like hundreds and hundreds of genuine conversations on Instagram where it was like, what are you doing? This is what I'm doing. Do you want to talk on the phone? Want to get on a Zoom call? And I had like hundreds, maybe thousands of DM conversations with people very early on, which helped me create those relationships. I think it's tough when people come into social media wanting to just become an influencer, but they don't really like the process of growing. They approach it as they want the end result of the money and the deals and the connections, but they don't want to go through the process of building relationships like the good old fashioned way. So I did it because I truly loved it. And it gives what you put into it too.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a ton of work, right? Especially as you scale and you start to have tens of thousands, or in your case, you have almost 150,000 followers. Just the volume alone of communication,
It's a lot.
can be, yeah, it can be
Yeah.
overwhelming. I'm sure it's hard to filter and even if you're interested in talking to somebody, it's like, how much bandwidth do you have to answer yet another DM after a full day of doing it and all that? So I'm sure that's an interesting dynamic to balance as well. But so you mentioned that what did you say, 25 properties in the first year?
Yeah, something like that. And people when they hear that are like, whoa, you either had a trust fund or an inheritance or like you're just rich independently. And I spent actually all of my money on my first property. And so I remember sitting in like a very early goal session and thinking, I want to buy multiple properties in my first couple years. But then I was like, but shoot, I used up all my money on one property. And I think that's actually a problem that a lot of people run into. And I coach a lot of people, and that's actually what they always come to me saying is, I can't even buy my first one because how am I going to buy my second one? And I'm like, you don't worry about that. You just buy your first one and we'll figure it out. Because what people don't realize is there's a million ways to fund deals. After you get your first one and kind of builds that credibility, I ended up learning how to leverage private money, hard money, partnerships, a whole lot of different things in order to buy those 25 units. But I think if I had let that overwhelm of where am I going to get money from for that first deal, I may not have ever started.
No, it's a great point. And I think the headline of 25 units is only part of the story. And I think it's more of,
Mhm.
yeah, the means to get there, how resourceful you were. It's important to tell that story too. Of course, if you had $10 million in liquid funds available, then you could probably go buy 25 houses without having to use all those extra tools. But the fact that you're learning along the way, and I think one of the skills that I've seen you use most effectively is raising private money. And that's something that I know doesn't come that easily to people. The skill of sales, the skill of putting yourself out there and presenting an opportunity, even the mindset around taking money from other people and putting it into an opportunity. I think there's a lot of mental barriers that people hit, myself included, around, how you feel about kind of being beholden to investors as well.
Everything you said is, I will validate it because I also teach people how to raise money. And there's so many like minds, it's a lot of mindset work that you have to go through to be able to carry, I don't want to say the burden, but maybe the responsibility of other people's money. But I actually think that's a really good thing because it helps you make better investments. I think with your own money, my own money, I'm a little bit more risky with that because if I lose it, it's my money. But if it's someone else's money, I'm very careful about the deals I buy. And I think it's actually made me a better investor. So my first private lender was my mom and her partner, and she was watching me on Instagram. And granted, I don't come from a family with money. So I would never ask my mom for money. And I never even thought she had money to invest. But she was watching me on Instagram. She flew out and saw my first rental property. And then she messaged me like a couple of months later. She texted me and was like, hey, if you ever have something to invest in, like I'd be interested in talking. And so that was my introduction. Like she's not in the investment world. Like she was a professional violinist. And so it wasn't her world, wasn't my world. And so I went down the rabbit hole of reading books and watching YouTube videos. And I'm like, well, what does it mean to have someone invest inside your deal with you? And I figured it out just by watching YouTube videos and reading. And she invested in my second deal, which was a triplex in Cincinnati. And so after that, though, I was like, I wasn't really a professional private money raiser. I was just like, well, that was fun. Like I figured out how to buy one more deal. That's great. But I still didn't feel like I was experienced enough to raise it from strangers. I wasn't familiar with that concept. And so I ended up using a combination of partnership and hard money to fund a variety of flips that I did the next 6 months. And people were wondering, like, how are you continuing to scale? That was like the number one question that people ask me on Instagram, because a lot of people will buy one deal in 1 year and be like, I'm tapped out. I can't do it. And at this point, I was maybe like 9 deals in. And they're like, well, this is insane. Like you're 28 at a time, 3 years old, and you're just like buying a crazy amount of deals. How are you doing it? And so I started to tell the story of how I bought my second property and how that was using private money. And then I think people just became like very curious about that world. It's not, and I talked to a private money lender this morning, and he works in tech, and he was saying that like up until recently, he had no idea that this world existed. He just thought that the world was stocks, bonds, your 401k, and that's really the only way to invest. And then recently he was talking to one of our mutual friends, and he realized that he could earn a lot more money on his money by investing through private lending and real estate. And so because of that, I think most of the world doesn't know that this is an alternative way to invest. It started to be almost like an education to my audience of there is another way to grow your money that is backed by real estate and a little bit less volatile than the stock market. And then people started like pouring in and asking me, so can I invest with you? And it was very weird to me because I was like, oh, I didn't intend for this to be like a private money raise or anything. I just wanted to educate my audience on like how I did it. And because of all of the inbound requests, I've been sharing my story for at this point, maybe like a year, and kind of sharing all of the deals I was doing and building my online resume. That to me, my first like stranger private money lenders actually came inbound through Instagram DMs. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I ended up raising quite a bit of money for over the last 3.5 years. We probably raised like, I don't know, over $10 million. The only friends and family really has been that like my mom from that second deal. And everybody, the rest of the people have all been through like Instagram connections.
That's amazing. When you describe your strategy of how you tell your story and how you put yourself out there, the phrase that keeps coming to mind is attraction rather than promotion, right? You're not like
Hmm.
out there trying to shove something down people's throats. You're telling a story and you're letting the people that gravitate towards that reach out to you organically. And it's from a place of authenticity, right? You're not trying to angle them or manipulate them. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm out there doing. This is a
Hmm.
mission I'm on. Here's some of the opportunities that I've learned about just by educating myself on how to continue to grow as an investor, and here's what that could look like. And then I think another theme that I've just seen throughout your journey, right, is you're responding to the feedback that you're getting from that open marketplace. Well, people were interested in investing in your deals. Great. So you figured out how to facilitate that by finding more deals and building the systems to handle that. I imagine a good part of how you ended up starting a community was based on
Same
similar
thing.
feedback, right? Yeah, you're getting people
Yeah.
asking and interested. So maybe talk about how that kind of spawned.
Yeah, it's a very similar concept, and it's funny that you picked up on that because I was again like now maybe 20 units in, people were just like, "How are you doing this?" That's crazy. And a lot of people in California follow me too. I would say I have a very heavy California, New York audience, and they were like, "It doesn't make sense. Like our properties are $1 million, $2 million. Like how do you own so many properties?" And so they started asking me to teach them how to do it. And at the time I was like, really? Like I am new. I feel like I'm just learning how to invest, but I've always been of the mindset that if I can help someone who's just one step below me, I can at least guide them to where I am today. And most of the world probably has zero rental properties. And so if I've managed to buy 20 at this point, I could probably help people like buy their first one and share my lessons and get them there and share my connections. And so in 2020, it might have been like 2021 or 2022, I started my like first coaching cohort. And then we just had so much demand that I was like, maybe I'll just make a course. Like that seems like a logical thing to do. And so I made a course with all my knowledge on how to invest out of state. And then people started asking for, well, what if I want to meet other out of state investors? Because everyone knows that your network in a market is actually more powerful than anything. If you want a real estate agent, then you find a local investor and you say, who's your favorite real estate agent? Or where are you investing? What are you being successful in? What strategy do you recommend in this market? So that missing piece is like always that real estate investor who helps guide you in the market that you choose and validates all of your numbers. That's what I had. That's what really changed my life. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, like people are looking for a community. And so I ended up creating what was called Out of State Investor Academy. That's now called Hello Rentals, but as a way to kind of connect other out of state investors.
Yeah, no, I love that. And again, it was in response to you said you had a very coastal centric audience, California, New York, these places where home prices are pretty wild and buying a rental property just doesn't make sense pretty much no matter how you slice it, unless you buy it in cash. And even then,
Mhm.
it probably doesn't make sense because it's a poor return on your money. So when you open people's eyes to the possibility that they could go build a network somewhere else where there's more affordable houses that do cash flow, that can still appreciate, I'm sure it blew their mind a little bit. And so then following those signals and creating an outlet for people to explore that, learn the skills through your course and some of the coaching you did, then give them an environment to interact with each other, which is honestly what a lot of people really want, is just a place. I always think about it this way. It's if you're around your family or the friends you grew up with and they're not into real estate and you start talking about real estate and you see their eyes glazing over, you feel like you're the
Yeah.
crazy person in the room. And you
Yeah.
get into one of these communities and you no longer feel like the crazy person in the room.
Or they just tell you shouldn't do it. It's too risky. Why don't you just choose the more normal path? Why don't you just get a job and stick with your job? And if you hear that continually over and over again, then you're going to believe it. And so like when I look back at what made me successful in the first place, I like even when people ask me all the time, like, how did I pick Cincinnati as a market, as my first market to invest in? There was a local investor who I met on a business trip he ended up just mentioning casually, I own 8 rental properties. And I was like, what do you mean you own 8 rental properties? At the time, it meant like nothing to me because I wasn't interested in investing. But fast forward 9 months later when I was like, well, I can't buy properties locally. Where am I going to buy? I was like, well, Mark owns 8 rental properties. How about I just give him a call? And so when I gave him a call, he introduced me to the market. He introduced me to a realtor. He walked through the property for me. And I was like, if that wouldn't have been for him, I would have never pulled the trigger. Like I would have never been confident enough to actually take action. And so I think a lot of people are like missing that, like it's lonely and it's hard and it's scary to do things by yourself when you feel like you're operating within a bubble around people who just don't get it. And so and if you find your community on Instagram or in Facebook or in a different community, I'd love people to join mine, but as long as you can find it, I think that's what really matters because that is what is going to change your perspective of what's possible.
100%. You mentioned a couple of things, which is like finding investors in each market. I have some pretty nasty battle scars from trying to go out of state. The first truly out of state market we invested in, Iowa, we didn't do that. And we interviewed team members and we found an agent, we found property manager. We did what we thought were the right things, but we did not have that key component, which is the local investor in that market to act as a check and balance. And it cost us in a few pretty bad ways. And so now it feels obvious, but at the time we were going at it Lone Ranger style. Now I'm part of these communities and such as yours and some of the other online communities that are out there. And you're around people that are going through it. And it's much harder to make those mistakes when you're regularly engaging in conversation with people who are doing the same thing. Because they'll call you out or maybe they'll make a recommendation. They'll either share a mistake that they made or they'll share a resource that's helped them. And so like in every which direction, you're getting pulled, towards a more efficient path.
And that's exactly how I expanded markets. So after buying, 25, 30 deals in Cincinnati, there was a local investor in Augusta, Georgia, who was like, I have a construction team. I'm an agent. I have a property management firm. Do you want to expand into this market? And so, yeah, that makes sense. And so ended up flipping a bunch of houses inside Augusta, Georgia. And the same thing is true for like how we ended up buying a property in Palm Springs. Because I was at a conference, again, like this all comes down to who you know and your networking. And I had put it out there that I wanted to buy a boutique hotel and I didn't know how it was going to work or what I was going to do, but someone introduced me to a boutique hotel investor who happened to sit next to me at an event. And she said, oh, I have a property in Palm Springs. If you want my realtor and you want to walk around the market, just let me know and I'll introduce you. And so because of that connection, we found a property like 3 weeks later and the rest was history. So I think that if people are stuck and trying to figure out like where they want to invest, it's usually like a who, not a how problem. And who do you know who can get you to the next level faster than you trying to trudge through it alone by focusing on like the what you have to do.
100%. That's another example of the attraction, not promotion, right? Like you put out, hey, this is my goal. This is something I'm interested in. And you, again, let people come back to you with that introduction or that relationship. I think there's a lesson too, and it doesn't have to be a 100,000 person Instagram account, but just even there were 3 or 4 years that I invested before I even told people I was investing in real estate because I was afraid of what the perception might be at work or what have you. And I realized that all the connection points I was missing out on because a lot of people that I didn't even realize were investing in real estate. Once I finally shared that, hey, I'm investing in real estate. At that time, I had 4 rentals. It started a lot of cool conversations with people. There were some coworkers that reached out to me. That's actually how I ended up starting to coach people as well. And all because I just finally had the courage to at least mention that it was something I was interested in. I wasn't trying to shove it down people's throat or say that, hey, you should do this. I was just saying, this is something I do that I'm passionate about and I'm interested in. And the different types of connections that opened up were pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, that's actually one of the best ways to raise private money, though, is just to start conversations. A lot of people think that they have to know a billionaire to raise money or they have to have a lot of followers. I've taught over 100 people how to raise money and they've raised millions of dollars. But a lot of it is actually just in like how you introduce yourself and what you say during interactions. And I have them try it out, and anyone can try this out. It's very powerful. If you are at a networking event and someone asks you what you do, your automatic reaction is, oh, I work at Adobe as a product designer. And I get it because it's so wrapped into your identity. What you do is your day job. But if you just for once said, I'm going to try out saying I'm a real estate investor and my goal is to scale to whatever, 10 properties next year. And I'm looking for someone to partner with me to help me, whatever. And it's not asking for anything. It's just saying like what you do. And if they're interested in hearing more, then they'll ask you. And if they're not interested, then they say, cool, very cool. but I feel like at least 50% of the time, they'll start to ask more questions. And then you'll have all of these conversations where you just never knew that someone wanted to invest or was interested. And then you start educating them on what the process is. So it's never really a sales pitch. It's more like an education because they'll start asking, like, well, how do you do that? Like, how does that work? Oh, I didn't know that was an investment strategy. How is the money secured? What's the interest rate? And then eventually you could be like, oh, do you know anyone else who might be interested in this type of opportunity? So you're not really asking them, you're just asking for an indirect referral. And I would say at least 50% of that time, they'd be like, oh, like, I'd be interested in that too. And so I think that's a much better way of kind of approaching private money. I think that eventually most people run out of their own money and they have to find other ways to fund their deals. And by just changing that one thing in your conversations, you will open up infinite more possibilities for private money than if you just identify as whatever your day job is.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And obviously, it depends on the context of what room you're in. But I
Right.
do introduce myself as a real estate investor. Part of why I have this brand, the hybrid real estate professional, is that I work my day job. I'm proud of the career and the advancement that I've had, but I'm equally, if not more, proud of the real estate portfolio that my wife and I have built on the side. And so
Mhm.
I appreciate having the opportunity to share that and the impact it's had on my family. And so that's the kind of message that I usually lead with when I'm meeting new people. And no, that's a great tactical tip on just how to navigate some of those conversations. Most people think I'm full of crap when I say that I can operate and grow my portfolio in an average of 20 minutes per day. So instead of asking you to take my word for it, I sat down with my business partner, Nathan, and we ran through our entire 20-minute investor strategy in a free workshop. We go through all the different workflows, software, and tools we use to stay in control of our portfolios so we can focus on what matters most to us. You can watch the entire workshop and download our workflows for free at 20minuteinvestor.com. Again, that's 20minuteinvestor.com. And back to the show. So you mentioned who, not how a couple minutes ago. And the whole time we've been telling your story, there are all these additional layers of complexity that keep adding up. So first you scaled, you got 20 plus properties. Then you started coaching, you grew a personal brand. And with each layer of complexity comes additional time commitments, probably additional stress too. So who are the people that are on your team, whether they're partners, community managers, and like, how do you treat this whole kind of portfolio of activities that you have running all at the same time?
Yeah, and that's a great question because like we all have limited time to focus on things. But I after I started investing with partners on the real estate side, I realized what a gift that is. And now I don't like I'll ever go back to investing alone. Just because when I first started out, I was like, I felt a lot of like pride in doing everything myself. I was like, oh, I analyze the deal, I apply for the loan, I fund it, like I manage it, it's my property, and I do everything. And to me, that was like a badge of honor that felt like really good for me. And then after some time, I did everything for the first few properties. And then I found a partner who handled more of like the prospecting, cold calling, analyzing deals. And I realized like I really didn't miss it. I was like, oh, even though I was a finance major and I could do it, didn't mean that I like had to do it. And it didn't necessarily bring me a lot of joy. And so then I moved into construction management. After some time, I realized I didn't really like construction management and I much more preferred raising money and overseeing the project on a higher level than like day to day talking to contractors. And so that's why that Augusta contact ended up taking over the construction management and running that side of things. And I have a variety of partners right now, not that many of them because I feel like you get married to your partners and I don't want to get married to 50 people. But in any given partnership, I typically have someone who handles finances and acquisitions. And then I have someone who does construction management. And so those are the two things like I'm happy to give up because it's not my zone of genius. And then I focus on more like investor relations and high level project management to make sure that the concept is right and the design is right of the property. So that's like the real estate side of things. I think that as you give up different things, you realize what your gifts are. And then because I've been able to lean into my gifts, they've gotten more valuable for people. And the only reason, I mean, I think a lot of people want to jump to that right away, but unless you do quite a few things, it's hard to realize like what your gifts are and what you don't like to do. And so I would recommend for people who are just starting out that they do the thing and then be very conscious about what things are giving you energy and what things are draining your energy that you'd like to give away. And then when you're looking for partnerships, find the people who really excel at the things that are draining your energy at the time.
It's a great point. And like you said, the different businesses that you have require different types of skills. And so it seems like you, on the real estate side, you've settled in pretty clearly into the role that you want to play, and it plays to your strengths. Like you couldn't exactly flip roles. The people that are doing day-to-day construction management can't all of a sudden just appear on Instagram and start raising money and sharing
Right.
stories, right? Because they haven't put in the years of work to build to that, and vice
Yes.
versa.
And it
So I think,
compounds
yeah,
too. So like the more years you do it, the more people trust you. Like the more people trust me, the more they do construction management, the better they get. And so it is a really beautiful thing to find what you're really good at and understand that you don't necessarily need to do 100% of it if you can find the right people to do it. On the education side, I guess play like CEO role. And so we have 6 team members who do like a variety of like community management, back end customer support, my executive assistant, like copywriting, marketing, like all that sort of thing. That actually I feel like takes a lot more people to run, but I guess that's how I choose to do it so that I can spend my time kind of program managing and thinking more about the vision while the day-to-day tasks are handled on a lower level. So I guess between those two companies, maybe there's 10 people that I interact on a daily basis with, but I wouldn't be able to do everything I do if it was just me trying to do everything.
yeah, no, thanks for peeling back the curtain there a little bit. I know just the amount of energy and time it takes to run a community and keep it alive and keep seeding it with ideas and
Yeah,
engagement and events. Like that is a full-time job, if not
it is.
multiple full-time jobs. So it makes sense to hear that you have 6 people helping you out, and then you're obviously present there and always participating and running different workshops and stuff. And then if I remember correctly, you're still doing some one-on-one coaching as well, right?
Occasionally I will. Or we have other coaches who do one-on-one coaching too.
Yeah. No, it's a great kind of service stack to be able to offer. 2 more things I want to ask you about. One is the in-person event that you did, I believe it was May of this year. So that was spawning off the community, right? What gave you the idea to do that, and knowing all the effort and time and energy you'd have to put into that, and how did it go? That's the first one, and I'll save the second question.
Oh, it was great. It was very, I guess, fulfilling to see it all come together. It was a 2-day workshop with 100 investors who were all focused on building their business in different ways. And so the idea came up because people asked me for it, which is, again, like the theme that comes up over and over again is that you can have a plan, but things fall into place. And when people ask for something, you're like, wow, that's a great idea. It's a great way to bring people together. And I think it went really well. It was a lot of work. I don't know if you've ever hosted an event before, but
Not
it
at that
is.
scale. Yeah.
It was good though. I think it's to have people meet in person. Virtual communities are great, but where a lot of relationships are made are in person. And so from the events, there's been partnerships made, and I've seen them kind of blossom inside the community. I've seen private money lending relationships made, like 2 of my good friends in the community met each other and invested in each other's deals, which was really cool to see with their self-directed IRA. I ended up raising money unintentionally for the hotel, but I just shared what I was doing and we raised a couple $100,000 and just like deepened relationships with people who I brought out. So it was really cool. It's great brand building. So to be able to host an event and invite really good speakers out and have them speak on your stage is really impactful for both me and the people there. I'd encourage you to think about it, even if it's on a smaller scale.
No, it's awesome that it had such an impact, not only on you and it was fulfilling for you, but that you could see some of the longer term fruits of different relationships forming, and then obviously curate them within your community too. I love that.
Yes.
And the last question I want to leave you with, which is a little more open ended, is what is on the horizon for you in 2025 and ahead? You got the boutique hotel. You just teased maybe a joint workshop you're doing, but what else is coming up?
Oh, that is the big question. I've been doing a lot of soul searching because I have said yes to a lot of things as they come up, but I think at some point you take everything you've learned and you have to choose a path that feels the best for you. And so I think I'm still in honestly transparently like that soul searching period of is the hotel world what I want to pursue full time? Do I just want to continue buying out of state rental properties? I feel like you've caught me at a strange time where usually I have a lot of clarity on what's next, but I also feel like it's good to normalize periods of I'm not sure. And I'm being very intentional about where I want to go. And sometimes that intentionality takes time. And so you caught me in like the 1 to 2 months where I'm really thinking about it. and trying to be very thoughtful about where we go next. But it would definitely be like in the real estate investing space, just trying to focus on where I want to set my intentions, because where your what is this? It's phrasing is like where your focus goes, grows, something like that.
Something like that. No, I
Yeah.
appreciate you being transparent about that. And that I agree. It should be normalized to be able to search and think through. And I also, most importantly, it's celebrate what you've built already, right? You've built all these
Mhm.
different businesses. They're all doing well. You have people that are benefiting greatly. It's not just you that's benefiting. It's the people around you, the community you've built, the different areas you've invested in. You now got this hotel. So, I mean, sometimes you don't have to change anything other than just do what you've already done, right? And so, no, I appreciate you being transparent about that and giving other people permission to feel okay with still wondering, not having 100% clarity every second of the day, every month of the year. So,
Yeah, I feel like people don't really talk about it, but as high achievers, as I'm sure you are too, with everything you do, there is such a pressure of just knowing and moving and always going and going and going. And so I feel like I've gone and gone and gone really fast, really hard for 4 years. And I've never truly taken time to just stop and think. And so I think I'm at the season in my life now where I'm like, there's so many opportunities. And the more successful that you get, the more you have to learn to say no. And what you say no to is probably the most important decision. And I think you have to be intentional about where you say yes and where you say no. And sometimes that takes like quieting yourself and really thinking about what you want in life, because more is not always better. Sometimes less is better. And I think that people lose track of that when they're comparing themselves to people on Instagram, or like I'm also very guilty of that. This person has this big business and it's buying that multifamily and it's buying that and like this and that. And so the achiever in me is I need to do that too. But really it's like, why did we get started investing in real estate in the first place? What it's for more, whatever your answer is, more freedom, more time with my family, more this and that. And at some point you have to ask yourself, like, is this closer to that goal, or am I just like wanting more for the sake of wanting more? So that's what I've been asking myself lately is what is closer and what is just more that I need to say no to.
those are great questions everyone could benefit to ask at any point in their journey, whether they haven't even started yet or whether they have 100, properties across their
Mm.
different asset classes. So that's good nuggets to leave us with. And the other just highlight on that, right, is there's always something beneath the story, right? Yes, you did scale from 0 to 20 plus properties in 1 year, but that's not the full story, right? There's a lot that went into that: relationship building, hard work, learning different skill sets, just so much, right? And that's why we do these interviews. And that's why it's good to get out there and tell the full story. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you spending some time with me today. It's been a lot of fun. Where can people find you if they don't already know?
Instagram is probably the best place. My Instagram name is Lattes and Leases. I created it in 2020. Thought no one would follow me, and it's still my name. Or the community is Hello Rentals. So it's hellorentals.com.
Love it. Well, thanks again. And hopefully we'll have you back soon, maybe in 6 months or so, and talk about the hotel
Yeah,
opening.
of course. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you could take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.